Hi everyone, I'm Neat Sahone, and it's time for another MTG Top 10, the series where I rank cards based on their historical performance at Magic's highest level of competition. Today we're going to take a look at cards from Return to Ravnica. This video is sponsored by Wizards of the Coast as part of the Ambassador Program. Ravnica Remastered releases on January 12th, and it's a set featuring most of Ravnica's greatest hits. Several of the cards in this video can be obtained in Ravnica Remastered. You'll know that's the case if I show it to you in its retro frame printing. If you want to get your hands on Ravnica Remastered, use my link in the description. Anyway, Return to Ravnica released in October 2012, and as the name would indicate, it kicked off our second trip to Magic's most popular plane. As we'll see in this video, it was a very powerful set filled with multi-format all-stars that have affected and are affecting competitive Magic today. The number 10 card on this list has 81 points, and the top 8 all have 100 or more. To be eligible for this list, a card had to receive its original printing in Return to Ravnica. In all, there were 230 cards eligible, and in this video we'll look at the 10 that made the biggest impact on competitive Magic. Before we get started, here's a quick reminder on how I score cards in these videos. A first tier top 8 is worth 2 points, this includes events like Pro Tours, and a second tier top 8 is worth 1 point, this includes events like Regional Championships. Alright, let's take a look at the top 10 cards from Return to Ravnica, starting with our number 10 card, which is Grizly Salvage. For a black and a green, this instant reveals the top 5 of your library, and you can put a creature or land from among them into your hand, and the rest into your graveyard. Obviously enough, 2 mana to draw a card, even with some card selection, isn't the most impressive thing ever, but if you play Grizly Salvage in a graveyard deck, you end up generating insane value with it, so much that it often feels like you're drawing at least 2 cards when you cast it. Unsurprisingly, those are the exact kinds of decks Salvage has been played in. While it wasn't standard, it was played in Unburial Rites decks. That reanimation spell was great whether it was in your hand or your graveyard, and Salvage also helped you put your reanimation targets there. In Modern, it's been played in decks that use Dredgevine and other creatures who can easily return from the graveyard, and most recently it's been played in Pioneer. In the early days of that format, it was played in Delirium decks. Delirium is a mechanic that makes your cards better if you have cards of 4 different types in your graveyard. Salvage has the potential to single-handedly grant you Delirium. More recently, it's been used in Greasefang Parhelion decks, which look to put powerful vehicles in the graveyard, like Parhelion, and reanimate them with Greasefang. Salvage is one of the best graveyard enablers in Pioneer, and as long as there are graveyard decks in that format, it's going to keep getting points there, in addition to occasionally gaining points in formats like Modern and Historic. At number 9, it's Jace, Architect of Thought. For 2 generic and 2 blue, Jace is a 4 loyalty planeswalker. He's got a +1 that makes your opponent's attacking creatures get -1/-0 until your next turn, a -2 that lets you reveal the top 3 of your library to your opponent, then they make 2 piles, you pick one to put into your hand, and you put the other pile on the bottom of your library. And his ultimate is a -8 that lets you search each player's library for a non-land card and cast that card without paying their mana costs. That +1 makes it very difficult for your opponent to take down Jace right away, since he ticks up to 5 loyalty while making creatures much worse at attacking. The -2 can draw you 2 cards at a time, and that ultimate is usually a game winner, even in 1v1, because you get the best card in your deck and the best card in your opponent's for free. As with many blue planeswalkers, Jace is well suited to control decks. He was a staple in both block and standard, and he's seen intermittent play in Modern and Pioneer too, usually in blue-white control decks in both formats. He's gaining points more slowly than any of the other cards on this list, and there are other cards from this set that are putting up points too, so Jace is the most likely card to fall off of this list in the future. At number 8, it's Sphinx Revelation. For X, a white, and 2 blue, this instant draws you X cards and gains you X life. In other words, it's a control player's dream. It simultaneously lets them reload their hand and gain a bunch of life, which should give them all the time they need to play all those sweet, sweet cards they just drew. If you manage to resolve this after pumping a bunch of mana into X, your opponent is very unlikely to find a way to win. Unsurprisingly, Sphinx Revelation has been a central card in blue-white control decks in Block, Standard, Modern, and Pioneer. It's only gaining points in Pioneer right now, and it isn't doing so at a super impressive rate. So it's possible that, like Jace, Sphinx Revelation will fall off of this list in the long run. At number 7, it's Detention Sphere. For 1 generic, a white, and a blue, it's an enchantment that exiles a non-land permanent and all other non-land permanents with the same name until it leaves the battlefield. Oblivion Ring effects like this are already really good against tokens because your opponent will never get them back, and Detention Sphere can get rid of multiple tokens at a time. Obviously, it's also great in any situation where your opponent has multiples of something. In addition to that, it's just a really great, flexible removal spell since it can go after such a wide swath of permanents. It's been played in blue-white control decks in Standard, Modern, Pioneer, and Legacy. Right now, it's really only seeing play in Pioneer, though. At number 6, it's Dreadbore. This sorcery costs a black and a red, and it destroys target creature or planeswalker. That's an amazing deal, and has led to Dreadbore seeing significant play over the years in every format apart from Vintage. However, Dreadbore recently got some really bad news. In Lost Caverns of Ixalan, they printed Molten Collapse, which is a strictly better Dreadbore. It can also hit non-creature, non-land permanents with a mana value of 1, and if you've descended, you get both effects. Obviously, no one's going to be running Dreadbore anymore in 60-card formats with Molten Collapse in the mix, so it is likely that it's done gaining points. At number 5, it's Izzet Staticaster. This 0/3 creature costs 1 generic, 1 blue, and 1 red. It has flash and haste, and you can tap it to do 1 damage to target creature and each other creature with the same name as that creature. Seeing haste on a 0/3 is a little bit funny, but that combined with flash means this can come down out of nowhere and ping a creature. The Staticaster is particularly spicy against 1/1 tokens, since it can wipe them all out at once. It has largely been a sideboard card or a singleton card in toolbox decks over the years. It has destroyed a whole lot of spirit tokens from Lingering Souls in multiple formats, in addition to just being great against the plethora of powerful 1-toughness creatures that are played in all of Magic's formats. One of the nastier things it ever did was getting combined with Nightshade Peddler in Standard, which gave it Death Touch and the ability to tap and kill anything. It's going to keep on gaining points as long as 0/1s, and especially creature tokens, continue to be heavily played, especially in Modern and Legacy. At number 4, it's Supreme Verdict. For 1 generic, 2 white, and a blue, Verdict is an uncounterable Wrath of God. Wrath effects are, of course, super powerful, as they allow you to completely reset the game in most situations, but most Wraths can be countered by an obnoxious blue player. Obviously, Supreme Verdict can't be, and that's made it arguably the best Wrath effect of all time. 4-mana Wraths basically always see play, as they're cheap enough to save a control player from an aggro onslaught, and this one comes with that very real uncounterable upside. Nuking the opponent's board without asking any permission is always nice. As a result, Supreme Verdict has been played in Block, Standard, Pioneer, Modern, Legacy, and Vintage, and in all of those formats it's appeared primarily in blue-white control. At number 3, it's Deathright Shaman. For 1 hybrid black-green mana, the Shaman is a 1/2 with 3 activated abilities that exile cards of certain types from the graveyard for an effect. It can tap to exile a land and add 1 mana, you can pay 1 black and tap it and exile an instant or sorcery to make each opponent lose 2 life, or you can pay a green and tap it and exile a creature card to gain 2 life. The fact that Shaman has these 3 abilities has led to some players referring to it as a 1-mana planeswalker, and sometimes it does feel like it's generating similar value to a loyalty ability every time you use it. It provides graveyard hate while ramping your mana, pressuring your opponent, or helping you stabilize. While it found some success in Standard, its power has been most abused in Modern and Legacy, formats with access to easy ways to load the graveyard as well as fetch lands. In Modern, it was mostly featured in Birthing Pod and Jund. It eventually became clear that the card was too good for Modern though, and it got banned from the format in February of 2014. It continued to be legal in Legacy, where it was primarily featured in Delver decks, but just like in Modern, Deathright Shaman eventually proved to be too good for Legacy and got banned in that format in July of 2018. It remains legal in Pioneer and Vintage, and those are the 2 formats where it is still seeing significant play. The introduction of the Timeless format on Magic Arena, which features fetch lands, is likely to lead to some serious success for the Shaman too. At number 2, it's Rest in Peace. For 1 generic and a white, it's an enchantment that exiles all cards from all graveyards, and it prevents cards or tokens from entering the graveyard from anywhere. Upon being printed, Rest in Peace became one of the best graveyard hate pieces around, and this has resulted in it being heavily sideboarded in all the formats it's ever been legal in, to the point that it has more than 250 points. It's going to keep gaining points, but it's never going to catch the number 1 card on the list, which is Abrupt Decay. This instant costs 1 black and 1 green, can't be countered, and it destroys target non-land permanent with mana value 3 or less. Kind of like Detention Sphere, Abrupt Decay's strength comes from its flexibility. It can't hit quite as many permanents because of its mana value restriction, but it makes up for that by being cheaper, being an instant, and being uncounterable. While it had some success in Block and Standard, it's been even better in the non-rotating formats, where it can target just about every single card in many decks, since mana costs tend to run a lot lower. If you're playing against a black-green deck in Pioneer, Modern, Legacy, or Vintage, there's a good chance your opponent is packing a few of these, and that's why Abrupt Decay is likely to remain the #1 card on this list for the foreseeable future. So, those are the top 10 cards from Return to Ravnica. Remember, this video was sponsored by Wizards of the Coast as part of the Ambassador program. If you want to get your hands on some Ravnica Remastered, use my link in the description below. Thanks for watching.